MacVoices is supported by ExpressVPN. Secure your surfing at expressvpn.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we're going to have a panel discussion today about something that I think is maybe, it's not exactly a little bit different for MacVoices, but it's out there on the edge a little bit. And I will say this, I've talked to my panelists about this, and I want to make very clear to you, we do not discuss politics here on MacVoices. It's just way too volatile a topic. So we are going to have a business discussion today. Now, it might sound like it borders on politics, but that is not the intent. And I don't think that's the intent of anyone here. We're going to talk about some of Apple's perspectives from a business angle. I had one panelist who did not accept the invite, say, what, are you crazy? This is a really dangerous topic. And it's like, well, okay, but that to me is just all the more reason to discuss it in a measured tone. And so I thought of three very measured people, but here we go. So first up, who also sort of inspired this with her discussions on the Daily Observations podcast, Ms. Kelly Guimont. Kelly, welcome.
Thanks for having me. And to Mark and Peter, I apologize because what happened was I was talking to Chuck and I said, I'm just wondering at what point in this conversation you're going to hit record or tell me when to show up so we can talk about it on your show. So.
And here we are.
So that was me. Yes.
Yes. Next up, Mr. Peter Cohen to give us his enlightened opinions. Peter, it's great to see you as always.
Oh, man, Chuck, you're playing with fire, asking me not to get political on a show about business.
This is a test, Peter, to see if you can do it.
Oh, as much for me as much for you as it is for me, brother. Let me assure you.
And joining
see how
us
much
also,
you can fix in post anyway.
Yeah, really. And joining us for another measured opinion, Mr. Mark Fuccio again, the guy that I turn to when it comes to business discussions. Mark, it's good to have you. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Chuck. Hi, Kelly. Hi, Peter. So maybe I'm the one who's slightly in the dark here. I just got a short cry for help via an email saying something about Apple and capitalism and something that happened at their shareholders meeting. So I really don't know a lot more than that. So hopefully I'm in the right place.
You always are in the right place if you're here, Mark. You're always in the right place.
Oh, thank you, Chuck.
So, Kelly, I'm going to turn to you because, seriously, you and I believe it was John Martellero covered this on the Daily Observations podcast. And a number of things that were said sort of went by, and it had me thinking and, had me wanting to comment on your thoughts. But the one thing that surprised me both really the whole way across is that this got a great deal of traction through a number of news sites on the Mac web. Like it was some surprise. And basically what we're talking about is Tim Cook was reporting on things, as one does at a shareholders meeting, talking about the profits and their plans for the future. And he stated the obvious that, we are capitalists. And I personally don't think that's a dirty word. Some people probably do. Peter's restraining himself.
I'm clutching my pearls.
Yeah.
My stainless steel pearls.
So, I'm going to let you kind of pick up where you did in the Daily Observations and give us some of your thoughts on this. Is this a surprise?
I don't. For me, it wasn't a surprise. I think the part that I think what it was that it was new. It's not an unusual position for a company to take, to be pro money. That doesn't seem like really a concern. And it was at the shareholders meeting, Tim was making this statement and said that, and this was the thing that I thought was interesting, which was the part I wanted to talk about, which turned into John and I talking about Apple as capitalist, which was that he said that politics doesn't enter into the decisions that they make. They just decide whether or not something is a good idea, and sometimes nobody likes it, and sometimes half of people like it, and sometimes the other half of people like it, and it doesn't really matter to them as long as they feel that they're doing the right thing as a company. And the thing that I thought was interesting in that statement was right in the middle of it. He said like they're pro-environment and they are pro immigration and pro-diversity, and they're capitalists. And I think it was just because we've never really heard him say anything like that before, that it was new and interesting, which is what I took from it, that, oh, isn't that interesting that he just sort of came out and said so, which is not usually something we hear from a company. I mean, especially Apple, who it seems like making money is a side effect a little bit, they seem to be very interested in making cool stuff. And then, because they make cool stuff, everybody goes and buys it. So it was interesting to have them state that up front, mostly because I think it's a thing that we would expect to hear from another company. Like I would expect to hear Microsoft say, yes, we very much like making money, or Amazon or Netflix or Google. I would expect it more from them than I would from Apple, but that was part of why I thought it was interesting, because it was stating the obvious. We've just never heard it stated before.
Okay, and I see your point. I guess my perspective on it was CEO shareholders meeting. Of course, doesn't it go without saying? And so maybe you're right. Maybe just the fact that it was articulated was the big news. Peter, what's your take on this? How do you feel about it?
Maximizing shareholder value is Apple's fiduciary responsibility under the law. So anybody who's, like I said, clutching their pearls or taken aback by this is either incredibly naive or just ignorant about the way that business is done. What's interesting to me, and where I think the larger issue is the way that Apple is doing this, and the way that Apple is positioning itself as a money-making business is ultimately changing. And Apple, has recognized that it because of its stature has an opportunity to I think move the needle with the way that businesses operate in a way that many other businesses can't, in terms of their employment base, in terms of their supply chain, and in terms of the way that they make money. But of course, Apple wants you to feel like making a profit is incidental to the business it's doing, because the profits that it's making are unparalleled in consumer technology and, in point of fact, for very few companies anywhere in the world. So, of course, they're going to, try to distract you with something shiny and jingly and say, no, we're not about making money. We're about the intersection of technology and fine arts, or whatever crap they're going to come up with this week. That's marketing, brother. That's, they're here to make money. If they weren't making money, none of us would be talking about this right now. Like the Diesel Sweeties t-shirt says, I was a Mac user when Apple was doomed. It's true.
And Peter, that's it. We wouldn't have the products, and we wouldn't have the services, and we wouldn't have all these things if Apple didn't have this ridiculously large nest egg that they have amassed. And so, I don't know.
Well, look, the nest egg, and I'm sorry, I don't want to jump on Mark here, but the nest egg, anybody who's actually done business with Apple or done business close to Apple understands that profit is the motive behind everything here. Look, I just did a stint at a local Apple service place that just recently closed, and what I found was interesting is that even within Apple's repair organization, it gives a hard 6-year limit, let's say, on fixing old computers. They force people eventually to buy new machines just because they make it so inconvenient for them to keep their existing hardware around. Now, sure, a lot of companies plan obsolescence into their products, and I'm sorry to use the phrase, But when you understand how it works from the inside in terms of Apple vintaging hardware, in terms of Apple writing down support for older equipment, or for products that go back more than like 6 or 7 years for new releases like Mojave and stuff like that, you see that Apple has got a limit where it's like, no, you got to be a new customer if you're going to still be our customer, or you're going to have to live out in the wild on your own. So this bloody-mindedness runs from the top to the bottom of Apple's organization, and anybody who tells you otherwise, including the CEO with his esoteric talk about, no, we're not in this for the money, man. We're in this for making the world a better place. Sure, brother.
Okay, do me a favor. Bring me back to that point, to the planned obsolescence point, because I do want to debate you a little bit on that. But I want to make sure Mark gets in here on the capitalism statement. Mark?
So, wow. Following Peter on that really makes me want to say that, capitalism, unfortunately, means a lot of things to a lot of people, and it's sort of become a politically or emotionally laden term that has a lot of excess baggage in some circles. So people have to really try to scrape around that. And this sort of mantra Peter was saying, maximize shareholder value. Well, that's that can sometimes be used to explain or justify or gloss over all sorts of really obscene and gross corporate behavior. I think actually, if you take a look at the details of Apple, it's probably quite to the contrary. They're trying to be, it seems, a good corporate steward, as measured by their efforts in recycling their machines, as measured by, they're now proudly saying that I believe all of Apple's facilities are powered by recyclables, and some large percent of their suppliers are, as measured by they're trying to better the conditions in their supply chain in their annual supply chain report. So yes, Apple's doing all of those things. It is spending money on it. I think there was famously an incident 3 or 4 years ago where somebody was, I forget the details, but pressing Tim Cook on how much that was costing and why are you doing it, instead of just dropping more profit to the bottom line. And I think famously at that time, Tim Cook told him, well, if that's the way you feel, maybe you're not maybe you're not an appropriate shareholder of Apple. And that really gets into, there is ability of corporations and corporate boards to try to select or try to groom different type of shareholders that sort of are more alignment with their value. Famously, probably Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger's company, they've had an owner's manual, and forever they've talked about their sort of guiding principles and what they expect of shareholders and how they run the company, and that if you're looking for short-term trading, you're not going to be an appropriate Berkshire Hathaway shareholder, so you should look elsewhere. So Apple, I don't think, has gone quite that far out, but it seems like maybe the cause for this brouhaha is, as Kelly was saying, the juxtaposition in one time, one place. Because certainly Tim Cook talking about being pro-immigration and pro-diversity and all these other topics is nothing new. The fact that he may link them all together in one sentence probably is. Not having been there, not having seen it, I'm just I'm relying on secondhand or third-hand reports.
Okay. I really appreciated Peter, bringing up the fiduciary responsibility, because that's something that seems to get lost. But I've been very impressed with Apple, and I will use the P word. It's good politics right now to be paying attention to the economy, to be paying attention to immigration, to be paying attention to some of these hot button social issues. And Apple guides through that really, really well, and yet doesn't compromise that fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders.
It's true. And I think that that's very much a generational thing. Like, Apple, from the time that the Think Different campaign appeared, right, Apple was making a very clear call out to boomer age customers, for example, saying, all right, here are the high ideals that we had when we were, barefoot hippies back in the day. as applied to this business, and we're going to make a very clear marketing message about, iconoclasm and sort of draw our customers into that and make them feel like they're all part of the team. I thought it was very interesting, but all through those years, Apple's image of itself and of its users to its users was very cannily market driven. And one thing that we've seen under Tim Cook's stewardship of Apple is a phenomenon that I attribute a lot more to understanding how millennials and post-millennials think about these things, where Apple is very politically active, and they're politically active in ways not specifically related to lobbying on Capitol Hill for special exemptions or legislation, but they're doing things like, being a more transparent company when it comes to making sure that people understand how their supply chain works, how they reclaim products. What Mark was talking about a few minutes ago. They're much more transparent about certain aspects of their business and their operation. The worker conditions for their suppliers and so on. And this has gotten them in trouble. Because these same reports, when they show that there are problems, or when word comes to it, all of a sudden the narrative becomes big bad Apple. Hey, folks, feel guilty about your iPhone because somebody killed himself because they couldn't handle putting them together or whatever. So that I think shines a negative light on that, but that hasn't stopped Apple from doing it. And if anything, Apple's doubled down. What's interesting to me is so few other companies actually have done that.
That's what gets me.
Yeah, but Wall Street lets them get away with it because as long as they're maximizing shareholder value for their shareholders, it's all good. Mm-hmm. It's all good. But yeah, the last thing that any of us should be surprised about is that Apple's a capitalist company. It's what kind of capitalist company Apple is that makes it exceptional.
And that was part of the thing that I found frustrating about a lot of these is, it's never whatever Apple's doing isn't enough, whatever it might be. So every year they release this supplier responsibility report, and the page where you can find that for 2018 is also the page where they go all the way back to, I think, 2008 or 2009. So they've been doing this for nearly a decade or close to it. And here's what conditions look like. Here's what we're doing for our workers. Here, like every piece along the supply chain, there are certain standards that we try to hold people to. And when they fail, then we get new suppliers, and things like that. And for me, that was the thing that stood out, is that they are putting this stuff out there and making it available. And there's always somebody ready to hate on that report because it's not enough. Because there is still mining of conflict minerals that's happening, because it doesn't say anything about how much of a recycled iPhone becomes new iPhones, and on and on and on. But at the same time, like, where's Microsoft's supplier responsibility report? Where's Amazon's? Because they have Kindles. And, for like 20 minutes a few years back, they had a phone, but they have like all those Kindle models that are also devices that they just keep updating, that keep getting, that end up obsolete, that get updated. And what are they doing? What's Microsoft doing with all of those Xboxes that they had to take back for the red ring of death? Like, was there any sort of responsible recycling happening there? And maybe part of this just comes from the fact that I live in Oregon, which was one of the first places to have e-cycling laws, where places had to take old junk for free so that you could recycle all those CRT monitors and stuff. But I find it really interesting that nobody is yelling about the lack of this from anyone else. Dell doesn't do it. HP kind of does it. Like I said, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and all those phones, Samsung. I don't see any of this from any of those places. And I have gone and looked. It's not like I'm just not paying attention. I have gone and looked to find out what this responsibility report looks like from other companies, and it's not there. So I feel like the reason people are having a hard time with this is because Apple is still sort of the hippy dippy, Steve Jobs barefoot on the floor with a Mac in his lap. Like, people still have that image of Apple, and they remember, oh, Steve went to Reed College and, was kind of a goofball, like, at first. And I don't think people are able to take, like, a company that wants to be environmentally responsible and wants to try to do the right thing by their employees and by employees of companies with which they have relationships with. We're a company that likes to make money, and we're doing what we can to make that possible and maximize that value for our shareholders. And I feel like people sort of think you have to come down on one side or the other, but like, a thing that makes great business sense, to use Oregon as another example, Apple has a huge data center here in the middle of Oregon, and to power it, they bought a dam and the hydroelectric power plant next to the dam in order to power their data center with renewable energy. So Apple's in the electricity business to make sure that particular facility is 100% renewable energy. So I think that's one of the things that I think people have a hard time with, is you can be idealistic or you can make money, but you can't do both. And Apple, once again, is defying people's expectations in that way.
And Kelly, on the same show, you were discussing, I'm pretty sure it was the same episode, the recycling efforts that Apple does.
Yeah, we talked about that too.
Yeah, and the idea that, okay, yes, the MacBook Pros are carved out of a single block of aluminum. Mm-hmm. And it seems like it's coming to a revelation to some people that, they recycle some of those shavings. Well, of course they're going to recycle some of those shavings. I mean,
yeah.
that would be stupid not to, from a business perspective. Forget the environment. It would be stupid not to do that. So yeah, of course they're going to do it.
Yeah.
But it also looks good because there are also some companies out there that don't do that kind of thing. So some of this stuff seems like such a blinding flash of the obvious in so many places, and yet it is a blinding flash to people.
I think it's just the boldly stated, of it, which is the part that you would think, having heard stories of Steve Jobs's, I would say, legendary bluntness in certain cases. I feel like people are sort of forgetting that some of that's kind of built in, like, it's been baked into Apple this whole time. And I think it's, for some reason, it's something that's sort of hard for people to wrap their heads around again, that they are so direct, and that somebody said, we like to make money. And like, if being environmentally responsible also makes good business sense, then like, I fail to see the problem again. Like, why would they melt down the just because it makes good business sense. Well, so what? It doesn't matter why they're doing it. What matters is that they're not wasting near what they could be wasting if they were throwing all of that away. And that seems like some of that gets lost a little bit when people talk about this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would comment, Kelly, just listening to you, analyze that. I was with you up until the very end, because at the very end, you took it from being multiple dimensions down to one factor of just saving and recycling material. And I think that is symptomatic of so many of these type of discussions and debates, which is, if you take something that is complex and multidimensional, and if you boil it down to one thing, then I think that's where you have all these this politicization of effect, and people throwing bad words and hate and all sorts of other stuff.
Yes.
And the reality is, yes, Apple is doing it. Do I believe Tim Cook is sincere when he says we want to leave the planet a better place? Yes. Do I believe that also they're enjoying the benefit of saving production costs by aluminum? Yes. Who's going to figure out which is the stronger driver? I don't think anybody, certainly no one on this panel, certainly no one on this planet, has the ability to do that.
But does it matter? Like that was one thing in particular that I remember seeing cited more than one place, which is why that was the example I used. But like, does it matter why they did it? Like, to me, that's the thing that like, I don't care.
Right.
If
they did it for multiple reasons.
Right. And I don't care if it was 51% business or if it was 49% business, or if it was 4.9% business. I don't care. The fact is they're doing it. And it doesn't matter to me why they're doing it, because what it means is that they are consuming less aluminum from outside sources because they're using some of their own over again. And I think that's awesome. So I don't care if it's just because it's cheaper. It has this very fortunate side effect of contributing to, like you said, Tim Cook wants to leave the world a better place than what they found than they found it. And I feel like it doesn't matter to me why, if that's what's happening.
Today's MacVoices is supported by ExpressVPN. Another day, another data breach. It seems like everything you do online, from making a simple online purchase to checking your email, puts your private information at risk. Products you looked at on one website follow you around the web like a bloodhound. In the world of social media, marketing companies, and even your own internet provider tracking you, you and your activities are the products that they sell to others. That's why you need to take back your privacy with ExpressVPN. With easy-to-use apps that run seamlessly in the background on your computer, iPhone, and iPad, ExpressVPN protects you with just one click and no compromises in speed or service. ExpressVPN secures and anonymizes your browsing by encrypting your data and hiding your public IP address. You might be sitting in New York, but to the outside world, you're surfing from Los Angeles, or Paris, or Hong Kong, or many other cities. Your choice. All that protection comes at less than $7 per month with the #1 rated VPN service by TechRadar, and it also comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Even better, by visiting expressvpn.com/MacVoices right now, you can get 3 months free with a 1-year package. You've been thinking about a VPN. Now's the time to do something about it. Take back your internet privacy today and find out how you can get 3 months free by visiting expressvpn.com/MacVoices. Thanks to ExpressVPN for their support of MacVoices. Okay, Kelly, so it sounds like, and don't let me put words in your mouth, or let me put words in your mouth, I don't care. But it sounds like you're putting your priority is quote unquote saving the planet. All right. And if I am a stockholder, then my priority may be a little bit different. Mm-hmm. But I'm especially pleased that they find ways in the recycling. We're using that as the whipping boy here, but there's so many places where they find a way to serve both masters, mm-hmm. and for the benefit of both sides. And that's where I really respect Apple as a company. I respect Tim Cook as a leader, and it's like a 21st or maybe even 22nd century company that finds ways to do this kind of thing and make everything work.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's what's getting lost in all of this, is that nobody's pointing that out. Like, nobody's talking about that it doesn't matter, or that the reason that it doesn't matter is because my Oregonian sensibilities are all made very happy by the fact that this is all being recycled, and somebody's shareholder sensibilities are being made very happy by the fact that it's making them lots of money because they keep churning out these beautiful computers. So I feel like some of that is being lost as well, because it doesn't matter to me which one, why. Like I said, the breakdown of why, I don't care. They're using less aluminum, and nobody else, and shareholders don't care, because it's making them money. The price keeps going up, they keep getting dividends, the stock splits, all of that stuff is great for them. So I feel like Apple's really going about this in the right way, as far as being on top of all of it, and then having the I don't know what to stand up and say, we want to make a lot of money, and we want to be environmentally conscious, and we want to do both of those things at the same time, and they're managing to do it.
Peter, one thing that I don't know how you feel about it, but I've really respected Tim Cook for, and I think it's something that a lot of CEOs, in fact, a lot of people could learn. There was this has been a little while ago, but I believe it was in China. There was a tech conference, and I forget what the issue was, but a bunch of the executives left, almost in protest, and Tim stayed. and Tim continued to participate, and he received some criticism for it. He's receiving some criticism for being on the president's council, technology council, and I respect it.
Tim Apple is on his technology council. I didn't realize.
Yeah, and Tim Apple, right? And it's like, okay, I'm here to get the job done, and by me walking out, and not participating in the process, almost guarantees that it's going to go in a direction I don't care for. And I respect that, regardless of what you think about China or the current president or whatever. Okay, that's the environment we're operating in, and so I've got to be there, and I've got to be working with that environment. And
Apple suppliers employ hundreds of thousands of Chinese workers. Apple sells, billions of dollars worth of products into the Chinese market. So Apple's relationship with the Chinese government and the Chinese buying public and the people who are keeping an eye on those sort of things is incredibly important to the company. So yeah, I mean, it's good to see him be a grown-up or be the grown-up at the table when the situation arises. It hasn't stopped him from, speaking out when he thinks it's important, and also doubling down on messages that he thinks are important. One thing that I think that Tim does exceptionally well when he's given the opportunity to actually communicate it is explain why Apple fundamentally is different than Google and Microsoft when it comes to the privacy of your data and what your data means in the pipeline. I think that's a really important message, and Facebook and other social media and so on to kind of differentiate your what that means to you as a user, because it's a high concept for a lot of people to get, but it also very clearly differentiates morally and ethically the way that Apple does business, I think, in a very smart way. And a way that is a guiding principle for the way that he runs the company right now. And I think he deserves an enormous amount of credit for being able to spearhead that effort.
Agreed. Mark, I want your take on this to see if my perception is wrong. But my perception is that when it comes to the media, when it comes to the analysts, when it comes to just about everybody wants Apple to drop prices or drop their cut or drop everything. That's always the answer, is take it down, take it down, take it down. And that bothers me a lot. Not just, and I do hold a small position in Apple, which is equivalent to probably a thimble in the Atlantic Ocean, but it's there.
Tim Cook's doorknob?
Yeah. If I'm lucky.
No, it's just the thing that goes around the doorknob that you put the screws in.
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah. But the idea that, first of all, I don't see any of these people running, trillion-dollar companies. But second, it just seems like that's the answer to everything. Apple has positioned itself as a bit of a premium brand, and they refuse to give that up. And I really respect that, not just as a business person, but it just, I don't see any, let's put it this way, I don't see anybody telling Ferrari that they have to make a compact car. Everybody's happy with Ferrari being Ferrari. So why can't Apple be Apple? Why is it just constantly we got to do that rush to the bottom?
Well, I think you mentioned a couple of constituencies. Let's pull them apart, because I think their motivations for saying, oh, they need a cheaper, less expensive iPhone may be different. One, the analyst community. I think, unfortunately, a lot of analysts. Ultimately, what's their role to Wall Street? Their role to Wall Street is figuring out, okay, how much money are they going to make next year and the year after, and
how close can they actually get to those targets?
And or how close can they get to without making us look being wrong by mispredicting? But having said that, who is it? I think Henry Ford said, "Thinking is the hardest job there is, and therefore so few people do it." I think when it comes, to apply that maxim to being an analyst, it's really pretty damn difficult. And I think I don't know if it was Mark Twain or the physicist Niels Bohr who said prediction is difficult, especially of the future. And so I think a lot of analysts, they get in the position of they're used to being on a podium and being quoted on CNBC or the Wall Street Journal or Financial Times, but they have absolutely no skin in the game. When I see these things and it says, does he own Apple? No. Does it they own shares of the company? No. Does the family own shares of the company? No. Does he have a professional relationship with the company? No. I look at that and I figure out, why the hell should I think this person has any credibility at all? But having said that, it's a lot harder to say, oh, well, really what Apple needs to do is come out with a bigger device when everyone's thinking, I mean, actually, they were following that line. Oh, Apple needs to come out with a phablet, or Apple needs to come out with a netbook, or Apple needs to do this. It's the worst sort of product marketing to look around at all the features that your competitors have and say, oh, well, we need all of those. I mean, at some point, it's really difficult to tap into what problem does a product solve and what's the minimum feature set you need to do that. And sometimes are the extra features necessary? Just think about as you go down the supermarkets and you look at toothpaste or you look at soft drinks. There's so many different variations that just introduces friction and gets in the way. And the Jobs famously, you guys have too many products. We have a grid: professional, home, mobile, desktop, and simplified things. That goes. A lot of people ape that and say it, but it's intrinsically it's very, very, very difficult to do. Whereas everyone understands, oh, just lower the price. That should do it. In reality, anybody who's ever been in a business selling situation, they know that price is important, but it is hardly ever the only factor. And a lot of the iPhones, and especially the $1,000 or $1,000 plus iPhones when they first came out, that's a sign of status. So what's the thing people are buying with that? They're buying status. So you can't say Apple shouldn't do it. So that covers maybe a lot of the journalists. A lot of the analysts. A lot of the journalists, I think, these sites, are known to be low profitability. So I don't think that they're on the high end of the disposable income curve. So a difference between $400 or $500 between a high status, high cost Apple device and a no status, medium cost Android device is very important. So again, people look at it through their own point of view. So again, that says, oh well, they really love Apple, but it just costs too damn much. I'd buy that. And then there's some people who won't buy Apple just because it's Apple, and they're contrarians. But reeling this back into sort of the topic of this debate, this discussion, you can see that unfortunately, some products intrinsically have social meanings and social status. If you buy a crescent wrench at the hardware store, I don't think you care really where it's made. But what phone you use, like what clothes you buy, what car you drive, they send social signals about who you are, what you want to be, what you aspire to be. And I think Apple has really tapped into this very well in terms of how they present and market to a lot of their products. But coming back to this idea of is Apple introducing politics into its products? I I think we're seeing a secular shift that, thinking about, values and what people stand for is becoming more important. As commodities, or as products have all tended to homogenize, how do they stand? How do they stand out, and how do they make themselves, be different? And I don't know, is an iPhone worth $300 more than a similar device copied by Samsung? To some people it is, some people it isn't. And I don't think it's a value judgment on them. It's just people will buy what is best for them.
Okay, so let's dig into the meat of this, because I think this is really the important thing, and the thing worth taking away. And I kind of touched on this before, but Apple's using its position of power and influence and visibility, I think, in ways that it didn't before Tim Cook took over. And I'm not just talking about transparency in the supply chain or anything else. I'm talking about, him talking about issues of social justice, him talking about equality issues, him talking about issues from his perspective as a gay man in America, having gone through himself being white, obviously, but, having gone through segregation as a child, because of where he grew up. And one thing that I think that will carry the hallmark of, or is really the hallmark of his stewardship of Apple, is him being very upfront about that and positioning the company in a very visible way, in that way of support of those goals and ideals, and those issues that they want to put their money where their mouth is. And, it's never in big, extravagant, bombastic, 50-foot high neon letter ways. It's changing the homepage to something when it's appropriate to honor somebody, who passed away, who had a very meaningful effect on the world. Or it's, sort of quietly pushing for, efforts at racial equality, LGBTQ issues, issues for disabled individuals, and so on. Apple is still so cutting edge and so far and away the leader in so many respects that way. It's really quite incredible. And I think that is very indicative of a generational shift. I think that that's much more aligned with the principles that you hear, the business principles. Like, these are the companies that I want to do business with. You hear that from, to a certain degree, Gen Xers. You hear it a lot from millennials. You hear it a lot from post-millennials. The idea that maybe I can assuage my guilt about spending $1,000 on this really nice iPhone XS if I know the company is doing some good stuff. I'm going to get the red one because I know that money gets kicked to an AIDS charity. Okay, cool. I'm down with that. That's aligned with what I think. So, you have to be on the same political wavelength as Apple. If you're watching InfoWars and are getting all your news from Alex Jones, these are probably not welcome things in your worldview, right? So Apple is going to skew maybe a little bit to the left, of a lot of people. I don't say that disparagingly, just observationally. It is what it is. And so those are the people that are going to be interested in it. And I think that that's really interesting, because it kind of comes back to what Tim said to that shareholder who was wondering what they were actually doing to maximize value, and say, hey, look, if you're not aligned with what we're doing, that's cool. Sell your shares, give them to somebody else, stock price will go up.
And, especially when they do something material like the product red items or the watch bands for Pride Month and the watch face and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's a material thing. I have the first wave Pride band, and and people like, and one of the things that I like about it is that when I wear it, people ask me about it. And the other thing that I like about it is that at some point they had to decide that it was a good business decision to stand up and to have the shirts made for the people who marched in the Pride Parade in San Francisco in the summer, and to have those watch bands available in all the Apple stores, and to do that kind of stuff. And they had to, at some point, make a conscious decision to put that out there and know that somebody who skews far more conservative, skews far more to the right, is going to forsake them as a result. There's always going to be people who don't like whatever you stand for. And, if it's baskets of puppies, you're going to alienate the cat people. And if it's baskets of kittens, you're going to alienate the dog people. So there's always going to be something. And what I have found really interesting is the way that Apple has stepped forward in that way, because again, I feel like they make a lot of really good business decisions, and making that business decision, they had to have weighed pretty carefully before they did it. And because whether I agree with what they're doing or not, it always feels pretty deliberate. And that to me was a thing that was very interesting when they started doing that. And, you can get a gay pride watch face and it's little stripes. And when you tap it, they all wiggle. And isn't that cool? And doing that kind of stuff and making those available, making the product red stuff available, the other sorts of partnership stuff that they've done with people, I find interesting in that they're just sort of coming out and saying what they stand for. And I don't see a lot of that from other places in that particular kind of way.
And that's one of the reasons I guess I was a little worried about the capitalism comment, because Peter, to your point, there's some things that sort of shifted to the left or make you feel that way. The capitalism comment could be taken that it's a little shift to the right, and that could be taken by certain audiences the wrong way. And I feel like Apple's
do the time warp again.
Yeah. No, wait a minute. but they do such a great job, I think, of walking the line and really standing outside of the generalizations of Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal. They're just Apple. And they have their feet on sort of both sides of the aisle and are doing what they think is right. And what, you may not agree with some of those things. You may agree with others and vice versa. And that's okay, because they're being themselves. And this is a really dangerous one to bring up. But I look at the way Apple tries to affect some of the changes and advocate for certain things. And then I look at what Nike did with the Colin Kaepernick ad. And it's like, okay, that was a statement, but it alienated a lot of people. It mobilized a certain amount of people, but it alienated a lot of people. And Apple does it so much better and so much more subtly. And I almost to the point that you don't really think about it. It's just because it is just Apple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. They're very good at that kind of messaging. Absolutely.
Yeah, Peter, I wanted to come back though, because just to the planned obsolescence thing, or the limited lifetime. I get, it's a hallmark of Apple to have the customer have a certain experience. And I do have to start to wonder that after about 6 years, 7 years, if you can have the same kind of experience with your computer.
Nope. No, you can't. And that's, that's an important thing to remember. And any of your devices, after that amount of time, they're not going to be working. So Apple's constantly moving the goalposts. They're constantly moving the goalposts in terms of what they're expecting the minimum experience to be for the user. And that requires them to be a little bit bloody-minded about dropping support for stuff over time. Mojave doesn't, or pretty much if you've got a computer with a few exceptions, a few like edge exceptions, if you've got a computer that was built before 2012, 2011, you're not going to be able to run Mojave on it at all. It's just not going to install when you download it from the Mac App Store, if you're able to download it from the Mac App Store at all, or put it on a USB thumb drive and try to install it. You just can't. Unless your machine, has, for example, metal graphics, and that's one of the key things that the installer is doing, is checking to make sure that your GPU or your integrated graphics processor on your Max Main Logic board is capable of running or capable of using metal for its graphics API. So Apple has set in Mojave the base threshold for this experience. It's going to be a computer that can run these kind of graphics. That by necessity forces a certain amount of machines off. Handoff, for example, the sort of magic ability for me to be working on information on one device and just start working on it on another device, whether it's looking at all the continuity stuff, looking at a web page on Safari on my phone and then going to my Mac and being able to pull it up from my dock and working on an email and not having to retype the email when I get from my phone on the train to my laptop when I flip it open and when I get to the office. All that stuff is predicated on having a certain level, a certain baseline of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and a certain amount of connectivity to be able to manage it. That has over time forced the older machines to sort of go by the wayside. But this is a purely capitalist exercise. It's not like Apple couldn't build exceptions to this, but then our user experience would be similar to what people experience with Windows and have experienced with Windows, which is unnecessary levels of complexity to get this this sort of stuff working, or unreliable methodologies for having all this happen, or getting it kind of to work here but not work there. That's antithetical to Apple's user experience and the prescribed way that it wants these things to work. So that forces that planned obsolescence thing. But people say planned obsolescence like it's purely capitalist intention. Yeah, it is. At the end of the day, it benefits Apple to be forcing customers to buy new hardware to get their software to work optimally the way that they should, or to be part of the cool kids with this new technology. But it's the carrot and stick methodology. It's, hey, wouldn't you like to do these cool things with this stuff that you can't do on your older gear anymore? Wouldn't you like to, do this stuff on your watch, for example, that you've been doing on your phone? It's always giving the carrot, to us as the incentive for us to upgrade these things so we can be part of that experience of this new technology and making it work. But on the flip side of it, if you don't have the budget to play, you're going to get left behind in the dust eventually. And that cutoff is about 6 or 7 years. And that ultimately, that's got to do with the bottom line. At some point or another, you have to pay. You have to keep paying to be a customer that they pay attention to.
Well, I'm in that same situation. I have a 2011 iMac, and for the first time, it won't go to Mojave, for the reason you mentioned. It just has some old, I think it was an AMD graphics chipset. So, a Mojave won't install. I'm just watching Apple, and I'm thinking the iMac, product line is a little old and stale. So, they're kind of keeping me on the sidelines until they actually come out with something new, instead of something was, last updated in 2017. And that's come up many times on this show. But I think in that regard, I don't know if you look at any Windows machine and think that you get that much life out of it. I mean, it seems for a while there that people were going to and they say, oh well, I need to go I need to get to I need to get to Vista, or I need to get the hell off of Vista, and it's too difficult. Let me buy a new Dell, and let me buy a new HP. And certainly Apple has been in the lead from, remember when you have to pay, what was it, $129 or $149 for an OS 10 upgrade, and then they brought it down to what, $29, and they've been free for at least the past 6 years. And that's basically torpedoed sort of the pricing for Windows upgrades at the consumer level anyway. So I think in that regard, Apple is dare I use the term, generous or magnanimous, and I think it all goes back to really building a good customer experience. And as much as I say it sucks, because I love my iMac, but I know that it's I/O. Apart from everything, probably except CPU, that I/O and screen storage, all sorts of technologies. There's been 2 or 3 generational advances since then, not just minor spec upgrades and tweaks. So in all regards, it is time. And as we all know, as pet owners or things, at some point, dogs die, cats die, and your iMacs die. So it's just you got all sorts of great memories and great use out of it, and open up the wallet and buy a new one. Apple, I want to see something pretty damn quick.
Well, and the way I look at it, you can go out, and if you have the parts and all, you can have a 1949 Pontiac that can run just fine, and it will get you from here to there just like a new Honda will. But the air conditioning may not be quite as good. The heat may not be quite as good.
49?
Well, yeah, okay, maybe not. I don't know.
Did it exist back then?
Yeah. If you hit something, you're not going to have seat belts. You're going to go through the windshield. I can go on and on with, trying to find a perfect analogy, but I think you get the idea that, the world has changed. Your Mac, assuming that you don't need any hardware repairs, will do everything it did exactly the same way it did the day you bought it, just as fast. It did not slow down. Okay, if you wipe the drive and reinstall, it'll be exactly the way it was the day you bought it. It's just that the world has moved on, and we have all moved on with the demands we put on these things.
Chuck, I have an idea, and I'd like to hear Peter and Kelly's comments, and then yours. What if Apple were to offer, some brand new hardware as a service? They're kind of maybe offering it now with the iPhone that subscribe and will update you every year, but do that for every device. Because what's your Mac worth? $1, $2, $5 a day to you? Price it so that you make it really easy for people to stay abreast of the latest technology. And I think by disguising it as a service instead of a purchase price or a loan to purchase it that you pay off after 2-3 years or whatever, it may incent people to continue to get with newer and better hardware. And
well, right now you can walk into an Apple store as part of the iPhone upgrade program, and if your credit is half decent and you're looking for the latest model, you can walk away with a brand new iPhone with Apple Care and 2 years to pay it off, or 1 year to upgrade.
That's just iPhone, though. I'm saying
that's just the iPhone. So you're paying, depending on what your credit is, somewhere
about $50, $60 a month.
$60 a month, right? So how much more would I be paying to lease my computer? That's the question. That's my number one question, because at the end of the day, if it makes sense for me, then yeah. But I'm rocking right now a 2015 15-inch MacBook Pro. So I'm like end of life anyway. And, when I was working at the store, this used to come up all the time, right? Because customers would ask me, do I buy a computer now or do I wait? And all the writing that I did for tech publishing companies over the years, whenever I would have a presence on social media, it was the same thing. Should I buy now or should I wait? And I was telling people, straight up until my last day at the store, the same thing that I've told people ever since I started writing for, Mac Central 20 years ago. And that is, you buy the computer that you need at the time, and you know that it's going to be obsoleted a day, a month, a week, a year, after you get it. Suck it up, buttercup. It's going to happen. Just don't buy into buyer's remorse, because buyer's remorse is for suckers. Any computer that I think is completely outside of its warranty program, and for Apple that means 3 years. 3 years is the hard limit stop on Apple Care Plus, is borrowed time, as far as I'm concerned. So if Apple were able to make that worth my while, if I was able to amortize, that cost in a way that made sense to me, I'd be really interested in it. But I think it would be a much tougher sell.
That might be like $30, $35 a month, just making some mental guesses, for $1,000 for a Mac, $300 for for Apple Care. and 1,300 divided by 36, I think, comes to 30.
Yeah, but you're forgetting about Apple's VIG. The interest that they're going to make off that experience.
Well. Again, I'm saying Apple. What does Apple need more? Do they need interest? They're not a consumer loan shark. That's why I'm thinking they have, they have the ability to offer a hardware service, and they don't need to, dig in, and screw somebody for 18 or 25 or 35% interest. Their motivation is just, get the hardware sale and get the profits off of that. Because all the money they're sitting in the bank, they're getting what, maybe 1%. Nothing.
My point in all this is
better off getting more users, more hardware subscription users and profits.
My point,
as well as software.
My point in all this, and I'm sorry I'm going to let you talk, Kelly. I promise. My point in all this is that if it makes more sense for me to do that than it does for me to put it on a credit card and just pay that credit card off, then I'll probably do it. But it's got to make sense for me. There's got to be enough of an incentive for me to do it. And the situation that I run into now is that I run my hardware into the ground. I'm not nice to my laptops. Mine's got carbon scoring like the Millennium Falcon at this point. It's seen some stuff, dudes.
Yeah.
Kelly?
All right, Kelly.
Well, the thing first I want to start with Mark's premise of hardware. And the reason is, I'm of two minds on this. First of all, I know almost exactly how much people love subscriptions, which is to say not. And the reason that I know that is because I worked not one company, but two, where their software went subscription. And when the software went subscription for what I thought was a very reasonable price, people, to put it diplomatically, lost their fool minds over it.
You mean they went bonkers? they went apeshit. Sorry.
The hate, the venom, the threats of legal action, the threats of violence, the boycotting,
sounds worse than comments on YouTube.
It was exactly like comments on YouTube, but meaner. And you wouldn't believe me if I told you even the mild stuff that came into the inboxes at both of these times when something went subscription. And here's the thing, is that knowing how much people love subscriptions, please know that I'm air quoting this, love subscriptions. When you take that and add it to the fact that part of the reason, Mark, that you don't want to buy a Mac right now, an iMac right now, is because you don't want to pay, as Brian Chaffin said just on my show the other day, you don't want to pay 2019 prices for 2017 technology. That's just a fact. And so I don't think Apple could pull it off because they would have to continue updating Macs at a rate that makes it compelling for me to go trade in every year or two in order to get a new computer and be on the front edge of whatever that's going to be in this, shiny semi-recycled body. If they're not going to update anything, look how long we waited for a Mini. And
don't get ahead of yourself, Kelly. If this actually meant like they would do an annual upgrade cycle for all their Mac stuff, I would be down.
Right. Oh, see, that's a completely different story. The Apple we have now.
Right.
Yeah. Good
no,
Lord.
They need to show the Mac more love and more updates. Otherwise. Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Like
exactly what it is.
Like they do with phones. They want to give people a reason to upgrade.
And I think all of you probably remember the olden days, as I called it this morning, talking to Brian about when operating systems were a single-digit number. And we got 2 events a year from Apple, basically, and one was hardware and one was software. So we would get, here's what some new stuff in the operating system looks like, and then 6 months later we would get, here's what the hardware looks like that's going to run all that software. And then we would get a look at the next wave of software, and then we would get the new computers. And it went back and forth like that. And it was very expected and normal and common. And once a year, something happened and made it new. And I understand if it's not going to be an every 12-month upgrade cycle. I know that processors and storage and all that kind of stuff is not evolving at the rate that it used to, and that's fine. But it needs to be something. Like every 18 months, something gets updated. I mean, Apple has enough products now because everything comes in a Pro flavor. And everything comes in a not Pro flavor. So, if you want to extend that even to the iPhone, there's the iPhone and then the plus size iPhone. So there's your Pro model because it's got the extra camera in it. There's a MacBook and a MacBook Pro. There's an iMac and an iMac Pro. The only one that doesn't, I don't think, is the Mini. But I don't know. Maybe they call the new one a Mini Pro. I don't know. But like everything comes in this Pro flavor. And so between all of those products, I feel like they should be able to nudge something a little faster, a little better, a little different once a year. And maybe it alternates between laptops and desktops or something, just so that we know that they do still care about the Macs, because I'm not seeing it. And I'm not seeing it in, we were supposed to get a new Mac Pro, still waiting on it. And we haven't seen anything evolve lately. We talked about it just this morning, I will say, on Daily Observations. We talked about what John Martellaro thinks is possible for an iMac upgrade, because Brian was talking about that. And we had someone on our show who was in the market for a new laptop. Her laptop is on its last legs. It's very obvious it's on its last legs. And she was looking for something new, and she ended up with a Mini and a beautiful screen so that she could get something that reasonably resembled something currently available as far as hardware, because she listened to Brian and said, I can't pay 2019 money for a 2017 computer. And I feel like until Apple takes that seriously, I couldn't take anything like this seriously. But if they're going to update things regularly, you can get something with more storage. You can get something with more RAM. You can get something with a little bit better processor,
better display, better Wi-Fi, better Bluetooth, better connectivity. Until those things start to improve, there's not going to be a way. And the only way that it's ever going to really feel like an upgrade is if you ride that Mac till the wheels fall off. And then, like when I had I think it's a 2011 MacBook Pro, and I got a 2015 MacBook Pro, and I went from having an optical drive to not, and having a platter spinning hard drive to not. And, it was so much thinner and so much lighter. And like, it took 4 or 5 years in order for there to be enough evolution for it to feel like I was actually getting an upgraded machine, for it to feel like it was newer and faster and better and different enough to be worth the money I was paying for it. So
Mark, I guess we'll check back in 2020, 2021 when Apple has transitioned or begun to transition the Mac line to an ARM architecture, and all of a sudden starts upgrading their Mac and starts iterating their Mac line with the haste that we see them doing for mobile devices. Check back with us then for our take on an Apple hardware leasing program.
I'm down for that, Chuck. Let's put it. Can you put it in your calendar for 2020 for 2 years from now?
Oh yeah, I'm happily. I've got a calendar that goes out that far. So I'm going to wrap it. I'm going to wrap this up but I do want to get my 2 cents worth in on this question.
Who cares what you have to say?
Well, nobody. But I'm going to give it to you anyway. I agree with most of what you all said. I disagree vehemently with some of it. I don't want Apple to do 18-month upgrades. Yeah, there you go. A little ropey. I don't want Apple to do 18-month upgrades or 12-month upgrades or 24-month upgrades. I want them to upgrade when it's meaningful and when it makes business sense. Yes, I'm a capitalist, okay? But putting that kind of pressure on Apple when you're just upgrading to upgrade is, we're back to the days of the performance speed bumps, that nobody could keep track of because you didn't know which machine you had. I want it to make sense. Mark, to your point, though, if you gave me 3 upgrades, you're going to have to define what an upgrade means, how much processor power or how much RAM or whatever. Give me 3 upgrades instead of asking me to pay for an annual fee. So maybe there is 2 or 3 years between my upgrade. because they haven't upgraded a machine. Then I think that could it'd be potentially very attractive. But I don't want them forced into that constant, okay, we're kind of like the auto industry, okay, we're going to bend the fenders this way this year and that way next year, and we're going to put fins on the third year. No, it doesn't add any value. And I don't want Apple to be put into a position of trying to sell a value that is really not there. That's my
because what ends up happening is the same thing that ended up happening to Chevrolet just now. Chevrolet has about 9,000 Corvettes that they can't sell. Now, Corvettes are terrific cars, but, they're knocking 15 grand off of the price of them, and giving people 72 months at 0% interest to move them. The last thing that we want is Apple filling up their warehouses, and they won't because, they run a very tight supply chain anyway. Yeah. But we don't want to go back to the bad old days of seeing boxes stack up that are undifferentiated things, right? Everything from Apple and every other major tech company has to really step up and be meaningful and be interesting and be useful. People buy Alexa, Echo Dots, and people buy AirPods, and people buy iPhones, and people buy Teslas because they're meaningful and they're important and they jibe with their lifestyle, and they provide them with some tangible aspirational thing that makes them happy, and as long as companies like Apple keep doing that, we'll be good. Fortunately, our desire for the novel always
insatiable. People will always want something new and different.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure. And to be fair, I'm not talking about like having to upgrade everything once a year, just so that we're clear on that. Like maybe 1 year, maybe like
upgrade all the things. No, upgrade all the things. All the things.
Zip it. This summer it's iMacs. Next summer it's laptops. The next summer it's the mini, whatever. Rinse, repeat, so that it doesn't end up being upgrades for the sake of upgrades. But like if ahead of time you've got a certain window to really dial that in and get it right, so that the new iteration of that machine is something different, that would be a thing that I would pay attention to and be really interested in. But like Peter and I have had conversations before talking about how a lot of people who write about Apple, whether it's from a business perspective or whether it's from a technology perspective, when people write about Apple, a lot of times they end up dismissing something or falling in love with something because of their own use case. And not for me is not the same as not for anybody. And that's a thing that gets lost a lot in all these conversations, is that like, I think maybe if Apple were to upgrade more regularly, it would be great for people. I know like, most tech writers all sound like Peter just a second ago. All the things, all the time. It's been 2 months. Why don't I have a new computer? And that's not how it's supposed to work. And I think part of what happens with that is that then things get lost or things get dismissed. Like a lot of people, when the not pro iPad got released last March, when they started talking about it, and it's a lot less expensive and it does a lot of stuff and it looks really cool and it was less money, a lot of tech people dismissed it because it wasn't faster, it wasn't bigger, it wasn't special in any particular way. It was an iPad for the people, and tech and the tech folks couldn't understand what that use case was going to be, or like perceive who is it possible that this would be really great for, and not look at it as a tool that could help in a lot of instances in some particular fashion, and just weren't seeing it. And I think sometimes when Apple makes a move like that, it sort of gets lost, and that's part of where the upgrade frustration, I think, comes from. Is a lot of people, especially if you've been around a while, remember that if you had a PC and during a certain era, you basically had to buy a new graphics card every 6 months, or everything in your computer would stop working because of how fast all of the stuff was evolving at that point. So, it feels like I do want the upgrade to be worth it, Chuck, like you're saying, but I think if you're only upgrading that particular hardware every 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, then it makes it a much easier sell to go, yeah, we should get some kind of iteration on this in some fashion, because something has happened. Storage has gotten better, and so everything comes with bigger hard drives. Chips are faster. Apple finally makes the jump to ARM. Something happens in any particular 2 or 3 year window that makes it a compelling case for adding that to the new thing, whatever the new thing might be.
And that's ultimately capitalism at its heart, right? Is if people see it and they think it's worthwhile, they'll gladly, open their wallet and fork over the money, and they feel they came ahead, and the company feels they came out ahead.
Yeah. Build a better puck mouse, and the world will beat a path to your door.
Yeah, I think Mark Twain said that, right?
Abraham Lincoln.
Oh boy! I had to get one in there, didn't you, Kelly? I want to congratulate the panel. No kidding, because I feel like this was a good, balanced discussion. I really mean that. It's exactly what I had hoped for when I asked these three folks. I don't think we got off. But I also want to invite the audience. If you have feelings, thoughts about this, if you agree or disagree with anything we said, that's fine. Chuck at MacVoices.com. There's the Facebook group. There's Twitter. Please let us know what you're feeling about this, and whether we get it right or wrong. But before we go, let's go around the room, find out where everybody is and where they can be found when they're not here, being so wise and balanced. Kelly, how about you start us off?
I'm sorry, I'm still back at you calling me wise. You can find me 5 mornings a week as the host of the Daily Observations podcast at macobserver.com. You can find me on Twitter. You should find me on micro.blog as Verso. And you can occasionally find me over on the Incomparable Network talking about various things there, like the Captain Marvel movie.
Peter, where can we find you?
My website is peter-cohen, COHEN.com, and I have a social media presence on all the things. Typically look for Flarg, F-L-A-R-G-H, or by my name, and occasionally on nice podcasts like this.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Mark, last but not least, where do folks get in touch with you to give you their opinions?
Best and easiest place is Twitter at Mark Fuccio, MarkFuccio.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Guys, again, thank you for the time and congratulations. Great performance. Great performance. Yeah, what a round of applause for yourselves. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. We hope we gave you some things to think about. That was really the objective of this show. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Mac Voices Facebook group and get more out of your Apple Tech with Mac Voices magazine, free on Flipboard. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us at patreon.com/MacVoices and join these folks who help keep Mac Voices coming to you. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.